Breaking tonight, Calgary's catastrophic water main break will take up to 5 weeks to repair.
I know you've already given up a lot, and the thought of 3 to 5 more weeks is almost unbearable.
The urgent call to dramatically reduce water use now in one of Canada's biggest cities. CBC News tracks down a suspect in that $22 million airport gold heist, a former Air Canada manager, now a wanted man.
We have not been able to locate him since.
Now his lawyer says he's ready to turn himself in. The Princess of Wales back in the public eye.
I mean, it's wonderful for all of us who've cared about her for so long.
A new photo and a new appearance on the books. What Catherine reveals about her cancer treatment.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. Ian is away. In Calgary, an urgent warning tonight. Residents will need to significantly reduce their water use for another 3 to 5 weeks, right as summer is about to start. Crews are working to repair a break in a critical water main, and the damage is much worse than anyone realized.
Our experts say this is the most dramatic and traumatic break of the feeder main they have ever seen. From all accounts, this should not have happened, but it did.
The pipe suddenly burst 9 days ago, triggering water restrictions for the whole city. Now, officials say they've discovered more problems with the pipe, 5 additional sections that require major repairs. Aaron Collins is in Calgary tonight. Aaron, just how bad are these breaks?
Well, Eric, I mean, they aren't good, that's for sure, right? Officials here, they used a robot to check about 4 kilometers of this big feeder pipe that you heard about, and they didn't see anything that they liked when they did that. Basically, there are those 5 areas you heard about. They're calling them hot spots, and that could fail in the same way that the initial failure happened just over a week ago. So that's really not good, not what people were hoping to hear. And while they say these hotspots can be repaired and they won't need to be replaced, it's not going to be quick, right? So 3 weeks minimum and maybe as long as 5, which gets us into late July and the really hot, dry part of the summer out here on the prairies. And the pressure to get this done in 3 weeks is really, really pretty high. Calgary Stampede, it kicks off 3 Fridays from now.
And when it comes to the water restrictions, what is being asked of Calgarians in the weeks ahead?
Yeah, I mean, a fair bit. So as far as actual restrictions, any kind of outdoor watering or really using water for anything outside, that's out. There's also some limits on some kinds of construction activity, and there's a fire ban in place too. There's also, on top of that, Calgarians are being asked to limit water use indoors where they can, if possible. So don't flush the toilet every time. Take shorter showers. Try, if you can, to limit laundry and dishes, too. Here's the mayor's plea.
I know it hasn't been easy, and I know you're growing tired of me asking you to please do more and to do it for a little bit longer. And I trust you know that I wouldn't be asking you for this if I didn't believe that the security of our water supply depends on it.
And Erica, of course, all of this is to make sure that there's enough water for critical emergency services like firefighting, something the mayor has warned could be in jeopardy if people don't cut back now.
Aaron Collins in Calgary for us tonight. Thank you. CBC News has learned a suspect wanted on a Canada-wide warrant for this country's biggest gold heist may be about to turn himself in. Katie Nicholson now on when that arrest could take place and what it took to track him down.
It was the largest gold heist in Canadian history, more than $20 million in gold and foreign currency in this 5-ton truck, stolen from a cargo facility. One of the first people investigators met was an Air Canada manager who gave them a tour. Simranpreet Panesar later became a suspect.
He resigned in the summer of last year, and then we have not been able to locate him since. We have an idea, and I can't speak to where we believe he is right now. In September,
2 months after police announced charges against him, Panesar has resurfaced. In a statement, Panesar's lawyer Greg LaFontaine says his client is voluntarily returning to Canada in the coming weeks and is anxious to have an opportunity to demonstrate his absolute innocence. He says right now, Panesar is tidying up his affairs abroad, but wouldn't say where. But on Wednesday, Panesar messaged CBC News via a WhatsApp business account connected to an Indian mobile number. Before he disappeared, Panesar and his wife Preeti made music videos in Canada, like this one, and were apparently trying to break into the Punjabi entertainment industry. Days before the gold heist charges were announced in April, Preeti, who is not a gold heist suspect, posted pictures from a photo shoot in a city in northern Punjab. She tagged people and businesses in her posts, and CBC News contacted them and sent multiple emails to Preeti's official account. That all led up to the WhatsApp message from the suspect on Wednesday. If Panesar returns to Canada, that leaves just one suspect still in the wind, Arsalan Chowdhury.
The case is still in its early stages and the investigation is ongoing, but across the border, a U.S. arms trafficking trial involving the alleged wheelman in the gold heist is scheduled to begin in September in Pennsylvania. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
We have new details tonight in another high-profile investigation, this one involving billionaire Frank Stronach. 1 week after he was charged with rape, new court documents are revealing more about the allegations against him. Anis Haidari joins me now. Anis, what have we learned today?
Erica, the court documents go over 5 charges. They involve 3 different women over a very broad period of time. Peel Regional Police allege in July 1980, Frank Stronach committed rape and indecent assault, offenses that have since been abolished and replaced with sexual assault. The second allegation is from February 1986. He is accused of sexual assault and forcible confinement against another woman. And then in April 2023, when he was 90 years old, allegations of sexual assault against a third woman. Police say the alleged assaults all happened in Ontario.
And what have we heard from Stronach?
In a statement last week to CBC News, Stronach's lawyer Brian Greenspan said his client categorically denies the allegations of impropriety, and also said Stronach looks forward to maintaining his legacy. And that legacy includes a lot of history in Canada's business community. He founded Magna International, a giant in the auto parts industry in this country, though he hasn't been affiliated directly for years, according to a company spokesperson. Frank Stronach is a member of the Order of Canada, too. Because of these charges, he's been ordered to surrender any passports and to have no contact with any of the 3 alleged victims. He's due to appear in a Brampton court on July 8th.
Anis Haidari, thank you.
You're welcome.
After months out of the public eye, the Princess of Wales says her cancer treatment is going well enough to attend a military parade for King Charles tomorrow, Catherine's first appearance since her cancer diagnosis. Chris Brown now with the reaction.
The Trooping of the Colour is British regal pageantry at its best, a celebration of the monarch's birthday with the king leading the way. But this weekend, Charles now seems sure to be upstaged, with word that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, will make her first public appearance of the year, her first since acknowledging she's in a tough fight with cancer. "I'm making good progress," she said in a statement released alongside a new photograph. But as anyone going through chemotherapy will know, there are good days and bad days. "My treatment is ongoing and will be for a few more months." In London, news that she's feeling well enough to attend was received warmly.
I think especially when you've got 3 kids at that age, it's hard. It's incredibly hard. And I hope she recovers as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm glad that she's doing better, and I can't wait to see what she wears as well.
It has been an incredibly tough couple
The
of months.
public last heard from Catherine via a video message in March amid a media frenzy over her health. She confirmed she was ill and would be taking time off without saying what kind of cancer she's being treated for. Since the Queen's death, Catherine, who's 42, has seen her profile and popularity soar, say royal experts.
As a future queen, she's integral to the future of the monarchy. Polling here in the UK at the moment is showing consistently that she is the most popular member of the royal family.
King Charles, who's 75, is also fighting cancer, but he's been well enough to continue a lighter load of duties, including the recent D-Day celebrations.
We have this unprecedented situation where we have 2 very senior members of the royal family both receiving cancer treatment at the same time. And, that has created a lot of uncertainty around the monarchy.
Catherine is a colonel of the Irish Guards, but the expectation is she'll be more of a spectator than a participant, traveling with her children in a carriage and making an appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace.
And Chris, Catherine also suggested she's feeling well enough that she's going to try to slowly start working from home.
Well, her doctors have said it's important for her recovery to do things that she enjoys. So she's going to start taking meetings involving some of her work and other projects, and also receive briefings from officials at Kensington Palace. But the statement also cautioned she's not out of the woods yet. The King, King Charles, has said he's delighted that Catherine's going to be here for Trooping of the Colour, and he's really looking forward to it. Erica.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Chris Brown outside Buckingham Palace in London tonight. At the G7 summit in Italy, Justin Trudeau met briefly with India's Prime Minister, the first time in person since Trudeau publicly accused India of involvement in an assassination in Canada. Ashley Burke shows us what happened.
Face to face, but still far apart. The day started with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at this G7 meeting with the Pope and other countries, sitting 6 seats away from Justin Trudeau. The closest they had been since Canada's Prime Minister publicly accused India of involvement in the assassination of a Canadian Sikh activist.
Congratulations once again.
Modi, who was denied the claims, made the rounds at the summit, sitting down with other leaders, but not Trudeau. Then late in the day, Modi posted this photo to his 98 million followers on X. Trudeau's office afterward called it an interaction on the margins of the summit, saying in a statement the Prime Minister congratulated Modi on his re-election and had a brief discussion on bilateral issues, adding, "Of course there are important issues between our two countries right now. We won't be making any further statements."
That they spoke, given what has happened over the past year, suggests that there is progress in repairing the relationship.
Good evening, everyone.
Italy's Prime Minister urged countries to come together at this meeting.
We can only deal with the global challenges we are facing if we are able to cooperate with respect and with a peer-to-peer approach.
But the differences between India and Canada run deep. A report by a cross-party panel of MPs and senators last week declared India the second biggest threat behind China when it comes to meddling in Canada's democracy. The G7's final communique says leaders are more concerned than ever before about foreign interference and agreed to bolster the G7's rapid response mechanism to counter threats. Canada also announced it will hold the next G7 summit in Kananaskis, Alberta. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Bari, Italy.
Vladimir Putin laid out Russia's conditions for a ceasefire in Ukraine.
Эти условия очень простые.
He says Ukraine would need to withdraw troops from 4 regions claimed by Moscow and pull its bid for NATO membership. Ukraine called Putin's demands absurd and untrustworthy. Meanwhile, those on the front lines and their families are desperate for this conflict to end. Briar Stewart is in Ukraine tonight and shows us how that weariness is affecting the president's popularity.
Another burial for Ukraine's war dead. 46-year-old Arsen Fedosenko was a military photographer killed by a glide bomb in a war that's lasting much longer than most ever imagined.
My feeling is it will finish in political way, not in the field, you know.
Ukraine's president has always insisted that negotiations can only happen after Russia withdraws its troops. Volodymyr Zelensky's presidential term would have ended last month, but in a country at war, there can be no election now.
70 to 80% Ukrainians say that we should postpone elections.
Anton Ruzhetsky conducts public opinion polls and says surveys show that trust in the president dropped from about 90% after the start of the war to around 60% now, while more than half of the public doesn't trust the parliament.
They do not say that Zelenskyy itself is like a bad guy or incompetent guy or corrupt guy. They say that there are some people in his team that are not very good.
In February, Ukraine's highly trusted military commander was dismissed, not long after the general said Ukraine needed to mobilize as many as 500,000 new soldiers. Anastasia Balba's husband volunteered to fight at the outset of the invasion. Today, he's still on the front line. She's part of a group of women who've been calling for their exhausted men to be demobilized, but without success. For 2 years, the government has been telling the whole country we're doing well at the front, she says. They should have been preparing the reserves. Ukraine has recently stepped up recruitment to replace the casualties of war, including Katerina Fedorov's brother. The truth is the guys are dying, she said, but nothing is solved. And even after all of the sacrifice, it's hard to envision just when this all ends. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Kyiv.
Now to the outpouring of support for Celine Dion after she revealed her private health battles to CBC News in her only Canadian interview in English. Alison Northcott now on how Celine's message is resonating with her biggest fans.
Here we have different ones during the years.
Celine Dion's fans are passionate.
My Celine room, like I call.
Mario Bennett takes that to a whole new level.
I have the brochure of her church wedding. I have the little napkin too.
He's seen her perform 13 times and is an avid collector of Celine memorabilia.
That's things around 2016 when I met her, because I met her very fast. She signed my cell here.
He's been watching as Dion has spoken frankly about her struggles with stiff person syndrome ahead of a new documentary called I Am Celine Dion, premiering June 25th on Prime Video. In a CBC News exclusive interview, she talked about her years of pain and the connection to her fans.
They're part of me. I was 12 years old when I met them. I probably miss them more than singing itself.
Bennett wants to see her sing again, but says fans will support her no matter what.
She don't need to prove herself anymore. Right now, we just want that she's okay.
That's Catherine Pearson in her Celine Dion tribute show, Passion Celine.
So that's my dress for tonight.
She's been singing Dion's songs since she was 4. It breaks her heart to hear her idol is suffering.
We just want her on stage, but we understand that she needs to take care of her.
Dion's revelations, her troubles getting diagnosed, and her efforts to comfort and protect her children resonate profoundly with Tara Zier, who also has stiff person syndrome.
She's the mom. She's all they have, and so knowing she's scared, and that as a mother, that really hit me to the core.
I'll sing again. That's for sure.
That is Dion's resolve. It's what gives her fans hope they'll see her on stage again. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
And you can watch the full interview with Celine Dion online and on CBC News Network.
I started to feel a spasm, kind of somebody pressing back. So what it does in the vocal cords is that you feel, not normal.
Celine Dion, I Will Sing Again, will run again this weekend on CBC News Network. You can also stream it on CBC Gem and the National's YouTube page. Scientists say they are getting a better picture of what BC's next massive earthquake could look like.
The ground shaking is going to be violent. The tsunami wave is going to be huge.
What new research says about the big one, next. Plus, a special Friday at issue on 2 very different reactions to the same top secret report.
There is no list of MPs who have shown disloyalty to Canada.
There are a number of MPs who have knowingly provided help to foreign governments.
But first, car thieves caught on camera smashing their way out of a driveway. We're back in 2. This is video of a brazen overnight truck theft in Brampton, Ontario. Thieves ram a parked car while stealing a vehicle from a driveway. Peel police say thieves there are now stealing 17 vehicles per day. New earthquake research is giving us a clearer look tonight about what the big one might look like on Canada's west coast. As Lindsay Duncombe shows us, while it could be more damaging than first predicted, the data could help the province prepare.
Using cables and sound waves, scientists now have a clearer picture of what the big one, a massive earthquake off North America's west coast, could look like.
We're able to image deeper and with better resolution.
Canadian scientist Suzanne Carbot was part of a 41-day mission to map the Cascadia subduction zone. That's the 1,000-kilometer fault that runs from Cape Mendocino, California, to northern Vancouver Island. Her research found the fault is actually broken into distinct segments under the ocean floor, and the northern part, closest to British Columbia, is smoother and flatter than the rest.
Those are characteristics that are conducive for the most damaging earthquakes.
A shift of tectonic plates in the Cascadia zone is capable of producing huge earthquakes up to magnitude 9. The last time it happened was in 1700, so scientists believe we're due.
When it happens, the ground shaking is going to be violent. The tsunami wave is going to be, is going to be huge. So we do need to think about how we can better prepare.
This seismologist says the new data also indicates an earthquake off BC's coast could happen closer to the surface, shortening warning time. He anticipates this research will help communities plan.
We can think about what those earthquakes might look like and sort of build a scenario.
The research will also help modelers understand how a tsunami might hit, indicating where it's safe to build.
This information of where the ocean plate is, how it's dipping, how shallow it is, how smooth it is, that feeds directly into our ability to generate and model tsunamis.
Although the new maps show what an earthquake might look like, they don't indicate when it could happen. Some of the Earth's mysteries, even the most sophisticated science, can't yet reveal. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's first Black concert singer to gain international fame is helping drive history yet again.
This is like having her blazing star emblazoned on the heavens.
The new opera on the life of Portia White next. Plus, Rosie's here for a special Friday night at Issue.
Hi, Erica. Tonight, after that report suggested that some MPs may be helping foreign states to interfere in democracy, party leaders are giving us their take.
Both Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre are putting the interests of their party ahead of the country.
So what's to be made of what they have to say, and should Pierre Poilievre take the briefing? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me on that and more.
A new opera celebrating Canada's first Black concert singer to achieve international fame has made its world premiere in Toronto tonight. And as Eli Glasner shows us, this portrayal of Portia White has already made history.
There's a joyful noise as a new opera celebrating the life of Portia White begins. Born in Nova Scotia in the 1940s and 50s, the classical singer was considered one of the finest voices of her time.
I feel so tired and weary.
Portia White sang for the Queen. She performed in Europe, but as one of the few Black classical singers, she faced resistance, issues that many say persist.
Our preconceived notions as to who should be doing what and who belongs where, right? It runs deep.
In the production, White is split into 3 aspects: body, spirit, and soul. Soul is played by Sate, a Black rock singer accustomed to being the first.
We're always talking about how we're the only ones. So then when you find your community, it's like you hold on to them.
The man in the Portia White t-shirt is the director, Howie.
For me, there was an innate curiosity with someone who, in her lifetime, was a concert singer, but she couldn't be an opera singer.
Now, as the focus of the opera, he's giving her what she always wanted.
It's so deserved, and that's the sad irony of it all, is it didn't happen in her lifetime.
This is like having her blazing star, her very bright star emblazoned on the heavens.
Portia's niece, Sheila, has worked to keep her aunt's legacy alive.
To have the Canadian Opera Company not only staging a work about my aunt's life, but also the fact that there's so many firsts involved with this production. You know, the first all-black cast, the first black director, the first black librettist and musical director and costume designer and wig maker. You know, this is a wonderful thing that Portia would be over the moon about.
Making history again, celebrating a singular Canadian sound. Eli Glaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Now it's time to break down the week in politics. Rosie's here with At Issue.
At issue this week, 2 more federal party leaders have now seen the unredacted reports suggesting some parliamentarians were working with foreign actors. Jagmeet Singh is expressing alarm.
I am more convinced than ever of the conclusions of the NSICOP committee and the report that some parliamentarians are witting participants in the efforts of foreign states.
While Green Party leader Elizabeth May says she's relieved.
There is no list of MPs who have shown disloyalty to Canada.
So how should we square those two conclusions? And should the Conservative leader be briefed? Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Let's bring in our At Issue panelists, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Rush. Good to see you all. Still talking about this report. Of course, the difference now, Singh and May have both seen this unredacted report, but come to quite different conclusions. And I wonder what we're supposed to do with that, Chantal. What are Canadians who are sort of following this supposed to make of these different responses?
At the very least, the government that is leading this file, because it is the government that is showing an absence of leadership. It's allowing this debate to go left, right, and center. There is no sense that it's being taken seriously. I think people watching from the outside will say, well, how can treason, because Mr. Singh did use the word, be in the eye of the beholder?
Yeah.
Both of them are experienced parliamentarians. They do agree that foreign interference is a serious problem and serious things are happening. But for Canadians to watch the spectacle of those 2 news conferences is bound to just generate more confusion about whether anyone in Parliament is serious about this.
And it's confusing because they can't really go too far in what they can say either, Andrew. Like, they're limited in how much they can divulge. So they're giving sort of their impressions or their feelings about something as opposed to information.
Yeah, I will say I think Mr. Singh's interpretation is a little closer to the plain sense of what the committee reported. If the committee had meant to say no sitting MP did anything wittingly, I think they would have said so. And in fact, the whole report talks about wittingly, knowingly, deliberately, and the only person they mentioned as a past MP was the one person who'd gone the furthest in terms of actually, going to a foreign country and trying to meet with a foreign intelligence officer. So where Ms. May came up with that conclusion, I'm not sure. She's never really distinguished herself as a hawk on national security, to say the least. She's not sure we should be in NATO. She thought Han Dong had done nothing wrong that he'd had to answer for. So I was certainly struck by the inconsistency between her reading of the report and what the committee had actually reported. I think Mr. Singh's interpretation certainly rings a lot truer in terms of being consistent with what the committee actually said.
Althea?
So actually, Mr. Singh took back, if you will, some of the impression that he had left after his press conference, that his office wants us all to know that he did not mean to say anything or leave the impression that he was saying anything different than what is actually in the report. And so the whole question about whether or not you feel like there are traitors sitting in the House of Commons, I actually think it's possible that they're both looking at the same information and coming to different conclusions for really not that great, crazy reasons. First of all, Ms. May said that she wanted to know whether or not anybody next to her, like sitting in the chamber, was a traitor. And after reading the report, she felt that no. she did talk about nomination races. So you get the impression that for her, that is less if you are not involved, but you've benefited from foreign interference helping you win your nomination, that you are unwitting or perhaps a beneficiary, but you didn't actively participate in this, that she wouldn't see that as you're being a traitor. And it looks like perhaps that was my takeaway from the press conference, that maybe Mr. Singh actually felt differently. But if you parse the words, the committee in its public report said witting and unwitting and used the present term. But they could have lumped in former MPs and current MPs, and they both could be right. So the problem is none of us have seen the report, so we don't know.
That is the problem. That is the
right.
central
So
problem
I mean,
for
it's
us.
possible that there are people. Ms. May left the suggestion hanging there that there are senators who are currently in the Senate who are witting participants, because she was very clear that she meant, members of the House of Commons.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Chantal. You jump in.
It makes no sense that we are sitting here parsing the thoughts and the words parsed by opposition leaders on such an issue. It's like sitting in a car that is self-driven, and you're just going along for the ride. You don't have a clue what the destination is, and you are not getting any clearer context from the government. It does not help to go to where you will end up. That the leader of the opposition, who stands closest to power, actually is happy to be blind over what happened, whether his caucus is compromised, whether past or present candidates maybe, or whether the lay of the land in Parliament should matter to someone who wants to be Prime Minister. You look at all that together and you think, who in the world are these people who are governing or pretending to want to govern this country, that they engage in this game? I don't think we've ever done analysis on tea leaves that we can't even see.
Well, generally you don't like me when I make you do things like that, so go ahead, Andrew.
Well, we should add to that list, the Prime Minister has been sitting on this report for 3 months and has done nothing, said nothing of any note since then. So leaving this to the party leaders, I think the conclusion might be, is not necessarily a very good idea. And yet that's one of the ideas you keep seeing batted about, as if they didn't all have flagrant conflicts of interest in dealing with this, in terms of they may have members of their own parties involved that they'd rather not speak about. So doesn't strike me as a terribly good idea. Yet we keep punting this back and forth now. Leave it to the police. Well, the police can't actually deal with this. Leave it to the party leaders. Well, they don't seem to want to deal with this. Now we're going to give it to the public inquiry, Justice Marie-Josée Hogue. Well, she's got enough on her plate already. She's got an extraordinarily crowded agenda over the next few months, and adding this to the ballot may not be the best solution. And I suspect what's going to happen out of this is we're going to keep going round and round the mulberry bush, and nothing's going to get done. So I come back to the idea of, as unsatisfactory a solution as it is of getting the names out, I don't think that's a solution. I think you have to do a lot of other things in terms of due process, et cetera. But I do think nothing's going to happen until you do. I think that's the only way we're going to start to get to the bottom of this, because at that point, nobody can evade it any further.
So what kind of pressure is on Mr. Poilievre, do you think, Althea, at this point, given the way that everyone else is getting the information and talking about it?
Well, his position makes no sense. It really doesn't. If you are serious about wanting to be the Prime Minister of the country and running your party and making sure that nobody sitting in your caucus is compromised, why wouldn't you want to have access to the information that can be available to you? This idea that his hands are tied behind his back and he won't be able to say anything leaves the impression that he's choosing partisan politics over actually leading and taking accountability for things that he could actually change. I'm not talking about kicking out somebody because the Reform Act ties his hands. That's true, but he could refuse to sign their nomination paper, as we talked about this last week. There are other things he should want to do, how to guard against foreign interference during the Conservative Party's last 3 leadership races. I think that's a really big question mark. And I do feel like, as you know, now Mr. Blanchet, who had not gotten a security clearance, is getting a security clearance, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, and will be reading the report. And perhaps he will shed a little bit more light between Elizabeth May's version of the reading and Jagmeet Singh's version of the reading. But the only person now, only party leader that refuses to read the report and get the clearance for it is the leader of the Conservative Party. That doesn't make any sense, and I do wonder if that position is going to be tenable.
But back to Chantal's point, the government may be doing things legislatively on C-70 and other things, but it has not helped us understand what we're dealing with, or help us understand, help Canadians understand what we're dealing with here either.
Yeah, I mean, the public safety minister keeps on this tired old line about, well, you know, the intelligence can be partial or conflicted, et cetera. That was the job of the committee. These people are not stooges, they're not bumpkins. These are people who've been on this committee for some time. They have, in many cases, backgrounds in law or in law enforcement. So to say that all the work they did going through 33,000 documents can be just waved away because it's uncomfortable for the minister to talk about it, I think is ridiculous.
Last word to you, Chantal, quickly.
The Prime Minister, as was already pointed out, had this report in his hands in March. It has thrown Parliament in kind of a tailspin mood over the past 2 weeks. And yet between March and 2 weeks ago, there has been no sign of much of anything happening from this report. So is Justin Trudeau's take on this the same as Elizabeth May? And if it is, he should say so. And if it isn't, he should say so also.
Okay, let's take a short break here. That was a good conversation. When we come back, we're going to talk about that capital gains tax.
Taxing small businesses during an economic growth crisis is economic vandalism.
Those changes to the capital gains tax rate are going ahead, but the Conservatives are voting against it. How are they framing that decision? That's next. At issue, the capital gains tax increase. After weeks of refusing to take a position on the Liberals' move, the Conservative leader was forced to respond by a vote, and they voted against it.
Taxing small businesses during an economic growth crisis is economic vandalism.
So how are the Conservatives explaining this move? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Althea, start us off. After weeks of not knowing what they were going to do, this is where the Conservatives ended up. And the way that they framed the decision was pretty interesting as well. What do you make of what they did here?
I don't think it was entirely surprising. This is long-standing Conservative Party policy. It's where Mr. Poilievre actually, it's the point of view he actually believes in. Yeah. And, you know, they have been making, or he has been making that clarion call for the past 3 weeks, telling businesses and people who want him to, you know, change the policy, in any policy, frankly, to make the case. And then if they convince the public, he will side by it. And in a way, that's what we saw in the chamber this week. He talked about this is a tax on doctors in the middle of a doctor shortage. This is a tax on food when, you know, this is not good for our farmers. This is a tax on productivity when we have a productivity problem. And so I think what was even more interesting in the way that he framed it, as in like it will affect regular people and it will affect people that you should care about, is that the Liberals seem completely unprepared for that line of attack. And even when there were questions, good questions, the Conservatives were asking the Liberals, if you say that this is only going to affect a small number of people, then make sure that it only affects a small number of people. The finance minister seemed completely flat-footed and could not defend her policy.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, the Liberals thought they had him forked. You know, either he endorses the policy and therefore enrages sections of his base and damages his brand as a tax cutter, or he fights against it and they can paint him as being in favor of the super rich. But that was 2 months ago when the budget came out. And maybe if he'd taken the bait in the first day, maybe they might have had him in that regard. But a lot's happened since then. Sure. The Liberal storyline of this is only going to affect a handful of the super rich is, I think, really broken down. It's broken down under both expert analysis, that it seems to affect a lot more than that. And it certainly, if it were to, it's hard to understand why there'd be so many farmers and lawyers and doctors and small business people who think it's going to apply to them. So that storyline's broken down. But then the other thing he did on the day was he kind of stepped outside the issue. It's not just for or against this particular proposal. And in fact, you'll notice he did not say he would repeal it if he was in office. What he instead said is, I'm going to bring in broad-scale tax reform, or I'm going to strike a tax force. Yeah. And that actually is the right response, which is, The policy itself is perfectly sound of let's tax capital gains at the same rate as other types of income. But the larger debate is, should we be taxing income at that level generally, or should we be looking for ways in which we can cut rates? And he's started that discussion off, which I think is much friendlier terrain for him.
Well, he didn't say he would repeal it because it's going to bring in a real huge amount of money, and he's well aware of that too, I'm sure. Chantal.
It's not only that it's going to bring a lot of money federally, it's also going to be bringing a lot of money in provincial coffers, and a lot of premiers are quietly saying thank you. They won't talk about it, but they're certainly not going to join a fight against it. I think the Conservatives at first expected the measure to be in the budget, and because they opposed the budget, they would have voted against it as part of the budget. But if you're going to lay a trap, maybe you shouldn't, show all your cards in the lead up to that trap, as in, come, I'm going to make you fall in a trap, and give you 6 weeks to figure out how to not fall in that trap. And that's exactly what the government allowed the Conservatives to do. Now, over that period, there has been a debate over this measure that the Liberals have not necessarily won. Opinion is split on this. So the issue is, who cares the most about this measure? And if you know anything about taxes, those who will pay or fear that they will pay that tax are much more likely to go vote because they're angry than the people who don't care because it doesn't apply to them. And I'm not sure that the Canadians really believe, especially coming from this government with the kind of brand that it has, trendy, downtown-ish, nice socks, that they see them as fighting a class war for the little guy from the perch of wherever they are. It seems to me like an operation where the government ended up looking, 1, fake, 2, over the top in its approach, and 3, playing games with governance rather than governing.
Andrew.
Well, and their chief spokesman on this, Chrystia Freeland, I have to say, is not a particularly persuasive spokesman. That speech she gave on Sunday, where she said, what kind of country do you want to live in? Do you want to live in gated communities where you're hiding from the wrath of the populace, et cetera, et cetera? It was pretty widely mocked, even by people, I think, who were sympathetic to the issue. So I think that's part of the problem as well.
20 seconds to you, Althea.
It's just strange that they haven't invested really a lot of capital in trying to convince people on the value of their policy. And I understand with some of the changes, it's a little bit hard to explain. But if what they're trying to say is we are an empathetic country, we want to make sure that there are social services for more people, and this is the way we're going to do it. Some of the criticism against the bill, like if you're selling a cottage, for example, and you get this one time in your lifetime windfall, like the government doesn't seem to at all care about some of the criticisms that have emerged. And a lot of the people who are affected, some of them are probably not at all going to be affected, but think they're going to be affected. The government has invested no capital in trying to either fix the problem or assuage their concerns.
Okay, thank you all very much. Before we go, I do want to say that Chantal is in Ottawa. She's going to really be mad because she is being awarded the prestigious Missioner Baxter Award by the Governor General. It is an award to mark something we all know, Chantal's exceptional service to Canadian public service journalism. So congratulations, Chantal. You still have to talk to me next week. Thank you all.
Thanks for embarrassing me, and thanks also.
Congratulations. Thank you all. And with that, I'll send things back to Erica Johnson, and she's in Vancouver.
When we come back, a little puppy finds itself in a real predicament.
The dog jumped off the bed and then fell into the vent.
The delicate rescue operation, right after the break. That's Archie Bean. Earlier this week, the poor pup fell through a vent at home and got trapped. It took a few tense hours, but in the end, he was rescued and is now safe and sound. His rough adventure is tonight's moment.
And you could hear this little poor dog, Archie Bean, whining, Archie. And we just really had no idea where he was at.
Archie, baby.
There was no vent cover on the floor in the bedroom. And the dog jumped off the bed and then fell into the vent.
Hold the flashlight there.
We would drill holes in the ductwork and stick a small lipstick type camera into the ductwork to try and fish through the camera and see if we could find the dog and find where it was.
Oh, that's him right there.
And we ran right into the dog with the camera. A local technician was able to use his expertise, take the ductwork apart.
Oh, got him.
There and behold was this little 5-pound dog. Our crew from Tower 45 did not give up, and the best outcome was that we were able to reunite Archie Bean with its owner.
Thank you guys, thank you.
Oh my goodness, little Archie Bean was just 12 weeks old and he went for quite a ride down the vent, but apparently he was unharmed. They are all happily reunited. As for the holes in the ceiling and the wall, well, probably not too much of a problem. They seem to have quite a lot of puppy love in that house. So good news for everyone involved. And that is it for us here at The National. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You can watch us anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app or subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Erica Johnson. Take care.